Hi, I'm Rick Anthony, and welcome to the Someone You Should Know podcast, the podcast that focuses on musicians, authors, and interesting people. We like to say we're making a difference one artist at a time. So sit back, have a cold one, and get ready to meet someone you should know. Now, over the summer, Leslie and I traveled to London and Liverpool to take a special tour that took us to see a lot of amazing Beatles locations. Now, one of those days, we met up with a guide who's not only a Beatles expert, but perhaps an expert on most things London and beyond. He is a London Blue Badge tour guide. He is an actor. He is a presenter. He's an author, a comedy writer, and so much more. Will you please welcome our new friend, Mark Conroy. Hey, Mark, welcome aboard.
Hi, Rick. Lovely to see you again.
We had such a wanted time, Mark. Leslie and I wanted to stress the fact that I want to make sure that people know and ask for you on these trips. After they hear this podcast, they're going to definitely want to know a little bit more about you. So we had such a great time. You took us to so many interesting locations. I got to ask you, what was your why for becoming a tour guide?
Well, I trained as an actor at university and the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama. And then as an actor, you need to earn money. And that often means in other ways. And I love travel. I love meeting people. And guiding was great because you could show off just like acting, but actually make people happy at the same time.
Absolutely.
So it's been a real pleasure.
I could see that. You know, it's funny. I've been on cruises before, and my wife said you would not be happy unless you were the tour guide. So,
but you were a fantastic client to have because you were so enthusiastic and excited, and that makes my job even better.
Oh, yeah, I think we had a pretty good group that day. And one thing I want to talk about is some of the places that you took us through on the Beatles tour. Can you hit some of those locations we could share with our listeners?
Yeah, well, although the Beatles, of course, formed and began and grew up in Liverpool, their professional life was mainly in London. And so there are so many locations of importance. And we cover Soho and bits of Mayfair, an area called Marylebone, and then St. John's Wood. And within those areas, we have the studios, the homes, the bars, the restaurants, the clubs, everything that they were involved in, really, and visited and saw and experienced during their time in the capital. And of course, one of them, Paul McCartney, is still very much in the capital, living in the same house today.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. There was an interesting fact. You mentioned the fact that Paul bought that house, in 65?
I believe it was 1965 for a lot less than it's worth today. And the reason he bought his house, and I won't give the address because they don't want too many people hanging outside the door, just those special people like you on my tours. He bought that house really because of its proximity to Abbey Road Studios, where Beatles fans will know they recorded about 191 songs. So the Beatles would gather at his home and then they would all walk around the corner together to the studios. And that was, their major meeting point.
And that's fun because Mark mentioned the fact that we actually went by his house and we could see his backyard and his back wall and everything. It was just fabulous. I got to ask you, how did you acquire such a vast knowledge about the Beatles?
Oh, I was born clever. No, it's not just that.
That I figured.
I mean, you've got to love the world's most famous and most important pop group, really. And so you grow up in this country, particularly knowing about them, hearing the music. And I had an interest in that for a start. And then after becoming a tour guide, you want to focus on things that people want to see. And there's nothing better than taking groups around when they are really interested in the subject. So most of the people I take on Beatles walks and tours are fans of the Beatles. The Beatles are their idols. And so it's so fantastic to see their reaction when they go to these places they've heard about for so many years and actually get to experience it live.
It was amazing, absolutely amazing. Now, in your research of the Beatles, is there any little-known facts that really kind of surprised even you?
Well, I think surprising is the fact that Paul stayed in London for so long in his house, which, although it's a beautiful and expensive house, is quite sort of humble in a way for someone of his wealth and his world-class superstardom. But he appears to like simple things in life, the best of everything.
And you mentioned that on a couple of times you've actually seen him or people have spotted him, taking his kids to school and such.
Yeah, bumped into him and also bumped into his current wife, and who's charming, often says hi, And no, he lives as normal a life as he can in that area, obviously within the bounds of security and privacy. But occasionally, yes, definitely.
Now, not to change the subject, I think we were in Soho, and you were telling us a little bit about the punk scene, on the fact that it lasted for a very brief period of time. That really surprised Chad, myself, and Leslie.
Well, we think of the Beatles as a boy band, but actually later on, Malcolm McLaren manufactured another boy band, the Sex Pistols. And with his partner, Vivienne Westwood, they designed the whole look, the feel, the atmosphere of punk. So in a way, Malcolm McLaren was the Simon Cowell of his day. He was a bit of a Svengali. He got these boys together and created the punk scene. And it lasted for about 2 or 3 years here in the capital. That was when it was at its peak and gradually faded away. And whenever you started to see punks in London after that, in the 80s, 90s, and even now, they're probably tourists visiting.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, we were on Savile Row, and we were going down to where the Apple studios were, and you were talking. You told us this interesting fact that they performed on top of the roof, and the police station was just a couple of doors, but they couldn't get down there. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So that was the Apple building. It had a studio in the basement, but it was an Apple building, which was their headquarters at the time when Alan Klein was head of Apple. And apparently every floor had a green carpet because it was Apple. Mm-hmm. And the reason that they chose the name Apple, apparently, is they found it very amusing that Apple Corporation, shortened, became Apple Core, the core of an apple. So there you are, humor in the 60s. And they, of course, by the end of their period, like most boy bands or any band who's been together for a long period of time, it's day and night, it begins to wear. And of course, they were falling apart a little bit by 1969. They were apparently recording in the building and decided on a very pleasant, sunny January day, midwinter, that they would go up onto the roof of the building and they got to perform. And one of the songs they performed, of course, was Let It Be, which had been written by Paul McCartney about his mother, who was a midwife who died prematurely, sadly. And they performed up on the roof, and the crowds could hear and started to stop and gathered in Savile Row, and it created traffic chaos. But the police station on Savile Row, which, as you know, is only a short walk of 5-7 minute walk away, it took the police 42 minutes to get there, apparently, because clearly they were Beatles lovers and wanted to listen to that music a little bit longer. And of course, that footage still exists. We've seen it recently in remastered versions and film versions of that famous epic concert. There's now a plaque on the building reminding us that was the very last time they performed together in public.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, another location you took us to was, I think, one of the highlights of the tour, definitely one of the highlights, was you took us to Abbey Road, and we got a chance to walk across that famous zebra crossing there and got a chance to actually go inside the gift shop and pick up a couple of things, as a matter of fact. Hold on, where's it at here? Where's it at? I got this to still put on the wall.
Hey, thank you for helping our economy.
Yeah, very good. So we had a wonderful time doing that, and I want to say thanks again. We had such a great time. By the way, we're speaking with London expert Mark Conroy. Before we continue, I want to say thanks for tuning in to the podcast, where you can find us on the World Wide Web at someoneyoushouldknowpodcast.com. If you're there, you'll see more than 200 episodes. Yes, we're very proud of that, and we're now in our 3rd year. I'm so glad that you're tuning in and enjoying it. According to Buzzsprout, the service that shares us to all the streaming platforms, so lucky to be heard in over 2,500 cities in 96 countries. Some of them are in our guest neighborhood. How about Camden and Bromley and Hammersmith and Fulham? We've got Islington, Redbridge, Southwark, Wandsworth, and of course, London. Mark, they're all listening to you today on Someone You Should Know Podcast.
That's fantastic. They're all fantastic neighborhoods as well.
Good. Someone You Should Know Podcast, heard wherever quality streaming audio is available. Like I said, we're listening to London expert Mark Conroy this time. And Mark, of course, you do the Beatles tours, but you do so many other tours that I've got to share with for fans of Jack the Ripper, or Sherlock Holmes, or Charles Dickens, or Harry Potter, or James Bond, or the Riders of London, or the Blitz, or World War II, hauntings in London, and the gay London. Can you share some of the tidbits of just some of these other amazing tours that you got?
Yeah, I will. I hope they're not fans of Jack the Ripper. I hope
no. As far as Jack,
but I know what you mean. Yeah, I mean, as a London Blue Badge tourist guide, you train for 2 years. You get fully examined, both written examinations and then several weeks of practical examinations, which means we're then qualified to cover museums and galleries and stately homes, and churches, and themed walking tours. But once you are qualified and registered, you then expand your repertoire and add walks that the public want. And so over the years, I've probably got about 100 different walks, and they include things like rock and pop. Those who are interested in an up-and-coming singer called Taylor Swift might have heard of her. Have you heard of her? Yeah. She's just played eight gigs at Wembley Stadium, the most ever so far, although I believe Oasis might be doing 10 in the near future. Okay. But she is still with us in a way, because although it's the end of that era, I just mentioned on my Instagram recently that her clothes and her costumes and her dresses are all on display throughout the Victoria and Albert Museum at the moment as a special exhibition. So, rock and pop tours, Beatles tours, but I do literature walks like Charles Dickens or Sherlock Holmes. I do James Bond and the Secret Service. I'll do a World War II walk and show the sights in the capital. I'm in Rome and London. And then neighbourhoods, so walking tours of the neighbourhoods. There's a whole stack of things that I can offer. And if I don't do it already, I will prepare it and research it for my clients' needs.
Awesome. Very good. In your personal opinion, what are some of the most fun tours and which ones are the most challenging tours?
Well, it's interesting because as a guide, what you want is for your clients to enjoy their time. So one of the places I've loved to guide over the years is the Houses of Parliament, the Palace of Westminster, which includes the Elizabeth Clock Tower that most people know as Big Ben. And so that's a lovely place to guide. I like taking people in an area which is less well known called Little Venice, where you have a beautiful canal system which goes all the way through Regent's Park down to Camden, where we have the market and also the location of lots of rock and pop venues. I love doing the South Bank walk along the River Thames, where along that way you can see the London Eye, you get views of Parliament, you get views of St. Paul's Cathedral, and then you arrive at the Tower of London. I love taking people on food tours through some of the fantastic food markets like Borough Market and Spitalfields Market. So you could probably come on holiday for a year or so and we still wouldn't cover everything.
I think that's just it. I think anything we need to do is we need to move to London, be Mark's best friend, and he just takes us every night to someplace new. Maybe I'll put that on my bucket list, man.
Yes, exactly.
We definitely had a ball with you, that's for sure. I got one thing that Leslie wanted to know. Have you met any famous people on the tour?
Well, I have actually over the years, and a number of very important people. In fact, I was doing a film locations walk around the area called Notting Hill, which itself is famous for that movie with Hugh Grant and Julia Roberts. And I said to these clients, it was just a small family, I said, we will probably bump into someone famous in this area. And they shrugged, thinking, yeah, he's just making all this up. And then who comes forward towards us but Hugh Jackman? And Hugh Jackman was delightful and posed for photographs and had a little chat. So, when you're with me, you might bump into somebody famous. But I also had a very famous American client recently who actually I hadn't really heard of because NFL, the American football, is massive in the States, of course, but a bit more specialist here in the UK. And although they come and play 4 games every year, and I often work with the teams, it's not something we necessarily follow because we're into what you call soccer, what we call football here. Anyway, I had this family turn up, and I didn't know much about them. I was just with the couple and their children. Apart from general sites in London, we were going off to Chelsea Football Club for a private visit. And when we got there, the screens on the pitch, which we had private access to, suddenly says, "Chelsea welcomes Drew." And all these Americans in the area started asking for autographs. Anyway, this man is called Drew Brees, and he's pretty big in the United States. And he is the most charming guy ever. And I spent a whole day with him and his family, and that was really lovely.
It's amazing. These people are going to go, something? I got a chance to meet Mark Conroy. There's got
Drew is probably saying the same thing right now.
That's exactly what I was saying. In the States, he's, if I interviewed Drew Brees, I said, did you remember that time you met Mark Conroy? Oh, Mark Conroy, gosh, yeah. He's the most charming guy. Now, one of the accolades that you won is the Guild Award for Best Guide 1989. Can you tell us about that award and some of the other accolades that you've acquired?
Yeah, I'm glad you said 1989, not
1895.
Yeah. So we have 2 guiding organizations, in fact 3. There's the Guild of Tourist Guides, and there's the Institute of Tourist Guides, and the Association of Professional Tourist Guides. So, within these organizations, prizes and awards are given after the training program. But most guides in London are pretty good. They've all been through rigorous training, but it's nice to be noticed and recognised, of course. But as a guide, obviously, you get to perform, and so performing and writing and acting has been a real mix for me throughout my career.
That's something really nice. I'm glad you received some of the accolades that you deserve, because you're very good at what you do. One thing I forgot to ask you is about a lot of people when they're touring London, they see blue plaques on walls and in certain locations. Can you explain how a location, obviously a famous location of something that happened on that spot, can you tell us a little bit about those blue plaques?
Yeah, well, English Heritage Trust is a sort of charity organisation that runs the blue plaque process nowadays. And a blue plaque goes on a building where somebody of note did something of note. So where they lived for a period of time and wrote something or achieved something. They could be an author, they could be a politician, they could be a military figure, they could be a rock and pop star. The house has to apply, a committee decides, the house has to pay for the installation and upkeep. And of course, there is that small risk that if it's somebody very well known recently, you're going to get big crowds outside your front door. So clever people put the plaque up just a few months before they move, increase the value of the property, and then avoid the crowds themselves.
Very smart. Very, very smart. Real good. Now, you mentioned to start with that you started off as an actor. You've also done comedy writing and theater, radio, and other things. Can you share some of these moments, these little facets of your life?
Well, I have performed in the West End of London, similar to Broadway, of course, and I worked on a play called The Cherry Orchard, where the big star was Dame Joan Plowright, and her husband was Britain's perhaps most famous actor ever, Laurence Olivier. And he was still alive at the time. He actually came to rehearsals, which was possibly the most nerve-wracking day of my life. And very sadly, a few years later, he did pass away. And I'm still not sure if that's due to ill health or my performance. But anyway, it was a fantastic occasion. And I've done over the years television, commercials, lots of commercials. I think I've advertised virtually every fast food outlet that exists. And in a television sitcom many years ago called Tandoori Nights, where I had a major role in that. But also, I do a lot of travel and history presenting. So for Discovery, I was in a program called Legends of the Lost with Megan Fox.
Oh, wonderful.
She's a big American actress, of course. And we spent a couple of weeks filming all around Stonehenge and trying to find out what Stonehenge is and why it's there. So that was an amazing opportunity. That's shown quite often on Discovery. I also worked on The Tudors on Tour, and that was a program taking viewers to all the Tudor locations as an accompaniment to the television series The Tudors with Jonathan Rhys-Meyers. And that was shown here, there and everywhere. And more recently, I worked with Miss World, a former Miss World, Miss Puerto Rico, and Wilnelia Forsyth was the wife of one of our most famous comedy stars, Bruce Forsyth, and I did a little piece with her at Windsor Castle at the time of our coronation for our King Charles III. And there's a bit of a link here, because in the past I had been a comedy writer on a game show called The Price is Right, hosted by her husband, and then got to work with her many years later. So everything links up in the end.
It's amazing how it all does that. It does do.
Yeah. Radio, I often go on radio. I mean, just like I'm with you now, I go on BBC Radio London quite often, on the Robert Elms Show, the Joe Good Show, on the Salma El-Wadani Show, and talk about London in great detail. And I've done American radio shows, Barbara Simpson's Hot Talk in San Francisco, the Mark and Christian Show, which was in Los Angeles, and for Francis Legault on on CBC, on Radio Canada. And I think we did that one in French, because I do guide in French as well. But I am also, and I have to blow my own trumpet here, a published author. So that is quite important.
That's what I talk about next. You've got 3 children's travel books on. Tell us about how we can acquire those, because Christmas is fastly approaching. So I think it would be ideal.
Yeah, I mean, what is great is that it does link up with the tourism and guiding, because they are books that I've written for young children, probably from the age of 6 to 10, something like that. And the wonderful illustrations are done by Bev Spate, and we did them for Lonely Planet Kids publications. There's Adventures in Noisy Places, and I included within that the Houses of Parliament and the space launch site in Kazakhstan and fireworks on New Year's Eve in Sydney Harbour. There's adventures in famous places and adventures around the globe. And these are all available on Amazon, and they were published by Lonely Planet Kids. So you can still go onto Amazon and find these, I believe. They're great for small children. They've got little pop-up sections within them. They've got lots of colour and wonderful illustrations, and then the copy. So they're great for young children.
Mark, what we'll do is we'll put them in the show notes there, and that way people can definitely get them for the holidays. There's another thing I wanted to put in the show notes is a way for people to follow you on your social medias, and also how people can actually ask for you to guide one of these tours if they happen to be hitting the London area.
Definitely. Well, on Instagram is my main outlet, where I have a little show reel as well, plus all my constant posts. And the posts on my Instagram are of people I'm meeting, celebrities, regular clients, sites, museums, galleries, so everything about London. So on Instagram, I'm the London Expert Guide, and I'll repeat that, the London Expert Guide. And it would be lovely for people to follow, but also through there, they're very welcome to contact me, and I'm very happy to set up a private tour on any theme that they're interested in.
Awesome. Very good. We'll include those in the show notes, Mark, and make sure everyone finds you, because you are such an entertaining person. You're so engaging. You're so fun. And we really and truly want to say thank you again. I know anyone who books a tour with you is just going to have the time of their life. And
Rick, can you become my agent, please?
I'm most happy. Just count me for 10%. I got to ask you, any final thoughts that we should know about you or London that we should be on the lookout for?
Well, I would say that London itself is everything that you could possibly want. There's something in London for everyone. It's a vast city. It's got neighbourhoods. It's got museums, galleries, shops, entertainment, restaurants. Anything you want, you will find in the capital somewhere. And about me, I would say, for me, apart from giving knowledge and information, humour and laughter is really important. And I hope when I give a tour, my clients leave me with a bit of a smile.
Absolutely. We were smiling all the way back to our hotel that evening. One thing that really surprised me, Mark, is people were asking me, what did you like best about London? I said, you know something? One was the people. The people were just absolutely fun, engaging, absolutely wonderful to help you around. The other thing was every time you looked at something, it was like, oh my gosh, that's so breathtaking. Then you look 45 degrees and it's like, oh, that's so breathtaking. You look another 45 degrees. Every place you looked, it's something that you've seen on TV, or it's just something that your mind has just always wanted to see. And it just, from going from one part of town to the other part of town, we went ahead on one of those hop on, hop off buses. We did that for an entire day, and it was fun because you get different perspectives of things.
And I would say because of the Blitz and World War II, in fact, going back, the Great Fire of London first, and then the Blitz later on, a lot of London was destroyed and therefore rebuilt. So you've got this real mix of old and new, of every different period of architecture, which makes it fascinating to see. And obviously, it is quite overwhelming for some people, particularly if you're not used to living in a massive city. So I would say hiring a Blue Badge tourist guide will really help you focus, find the essentials, and save wasting time looking at things that you don't want to see.
Mark, you have been an absolute delight to be on the show. Leslie and I, once again, loved you on the tour. We love you on the show, and I hope our listeners book plenty of tours to see you and to see London.
Thanks so much, Rick. Delighted to be here.
Hi, this is Rick Anthony, thanking you again for listening to this episode of Someone You Should Know. Now, if you're an aspiring musician or an established musician that's looking for a little exposure, I invite you to drop us a line at someoneyoushouldknowpodcast@gmail.com. That's someoneyoushouldknowpodcast@gmail.com. Also, I invite you to tell a friend about the Someone You Should Know podcast. I thank you for tuning in this time, and I invite you to check us out next time on the Someone You Should Know podcast, because you never know who's going to show up. Until next time, remember, God loves you, and so do I.